I am a 33-year-old guy named Mark, and if you asked anyone who has known me longer than 5 minutes, they would tell you that I am the type who takes pride in doing things the right way. I grew up in a blue-collar family in Missouri where money was tight, but loyalty was not. My parents were the kind of people who would give you their last $20 and apologize that they did not have more. They were loud, stubborn, imperfect, and sometimes exhausting, but they raised me and my younger brother with a simple philosophy. If your family needs something, you show up. No hesitation, no scorekeeping, just show up. I carried that into adulthood. When my parents needed help patching a roof after a storm, I drove over with my tools. When my brother's truck broke down, I took a day off work to help him replace the starter. When my nieces needed last-minute babysitting, I rearranged my whole schedule. Emily, my wife, used to say she admired how dependable I was. She loved that trait so much she mentioned it in her wedding vows. That was one of the happiest days of my life, even though her father, Randall, spent half of it acting like he was the director of a movie no one asked him to film. Randall is 58 years old, retired from contracting, and committed to critiquing everything within a 3-mile radius. The man could walk into a perfect restaurant, taste the most incredible burger of his life, and still say the seasoning technique was sloppy. From the first week I met him, he treated me like a defective tool he needed to refurbish. He called it teaching. I called it nitpicking. If he saw me grilling, he would lean over and mutter that I was turning the steaks too early. If I changed the brakes on Emily's car, he would hover like I was about to accidentally blow the driveway off the map. Even on my wedding day, while I was focused on promising myself to his daughter, he leaned over, narrowed his eyes, and said in this disappointed father tone that I should straighten my posture while saying the most important words of my life. After Lily was born, things escalated. You would think becoming a grandfather would soften him. You would think holding his first grandchild would unlock some gentle, reflective part of him. Instead, it turned every moment into a teaching session where I was the student who was always failing. One time when Lily was 6 months old, I was changing her diaper. Randall walked in, stood there silently for a few seconds, and then announced that I was wiping wrong, that I was wasting wipes, and that I was the reason we spent too much money on baby supplies. Emily laughed like he was being cute. I felt humiliated. It continued with every area of our lives. I make about $82,000 a year as a project coordinator. Emily makes around $45,000 as a paralegal. We are comfortable. We budget. We do not splurge. We do not miss bills. Yet Randall acted like we were moments from bankruptcy every time we upgraded a piece of furniture or bought organic food for our daughter. Every time we purchased something, he would shake his head like we were children, blowing our allowance on candy and say that we should have bought the cheaper version. When we paid for a cleaning service once a month because parenting a toddler while working full-time is exhausting, he said that people who throw money at problems never learn how to handle life. It felt like he viewed me as a walking, talking list of flaws that he was personally responsible for correcting. I tried for years to set boundaries politely. I would tell Emily that her father's constant commentary was wearing me down. She always gave him the softest possible interpretation. She would say that he was just trying to help, or that he came from an old-school mindset, or that he meant well. Every time she defended him, it made me feel like I was overreacting, even though every part of me knew I was being steamrolled in my own home. Then last month, everything truly boiled over. Emily was at work. I was home with Lily, who had just dumped yogurt on the floor because toddlers are tiny, chaotic scientists. I was wiping the floor with one hand and prepping lunch with the other when Randall let himself in. He scanned the kitchen like a foreman walking onto a job site and told me that my problem was that I did not know how to prioritize. I told him I was handling things fine. He ignored me entirely. He started lecturing me about multitasking, about how he used to supervise crews of men who were so incompetent he had to train them like dogs, and that I needed to learn basic efficiency before I created lifelong habits that would ruin my daughter's future routine. I felt something deep inside me snap. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in this quiet internal way that told me I could not keep doing this forever. I said that I did not need training. He raised his eyebrows the way someone does when they think they are being incredibly patient with an idiot and said that everyone needs training, especially me. That night, I sat down with Emily and told her everything that happened. I explained that this was not harmless commentary. It made me feel like a failure in my own home. She dismissed it again. She said that her father was just old school and that I should not take it personally. It felt like I was trying to explain a thunderstorm to someone who refused to look up from their phone. The next day, while I was home again, Randall showed up unannounced carrying something under his arm. It was a binder. A literal binder. He handed it to me like he was giving me the blueprint for a house he expected me to build. Inside was a collection of practical life improvements he had prepared for me. There were budget ideas I had not asked for, cleaning schedules as if I was a teenager learning chores, suggestions for reorganizing our home, advice on how to manage Lily more effectively, and the most insulting part of all, a chart labeled Areas Mark Can Improve. He said in this rehearsed paternal tone that since I did not have a strong male role model growing up, he wanted to guide me so that I did not fall into generational patterns of mediocrity. I stood there in silence, gripping that binder, feeling this heavy shock settle into my chest because my father might not have been a wealthy man or a perfect man, but he was a good man. He worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. He missed very few games or concerts. He never talked to me like I was a disappointing project he had to remodel. The fact that Randall had decided that my dad had failed me pushed something in me past the point of return. That night, I told Emily that I was done. I told her that if her father kept trying to change me, I would leave. I said that I would not spend the next decade being treated like a defective appliance. She stared at me with this stunned expression as if she had never imagined I would stand up for myself this firmly. She asked with genuine shock, "You would really break up our family over this?" I said, "If you do not put boundaries in place, then you are choosing him over me." Emily did not talk to me for 2 full days except for the bare minimum about Lily. It felt like I was living with a polite stranger who happened to share my kitchen, my bathroom, and my child. Every time she spoke, her tone was clipped and transactional, like she was reading prompts off a customer service script. I spent those 2 days walking on eggshells in my own house, trying to keep things normal for Lily while feeling this growing sense of dread twisting itself tighter inside my chest. On the third day, Emily finally looked at me with this distant, exhausted expression and said she would talk to her dad. She said it like it was some grand gesture, like she was preparing to climb a mountain on my behalf. I felt the smallest flicker of hope, something fragile and cautious, but still real. I thought maybe she was beginning to understand that this situation was serious. Maybe she had realized that it was affecting not just me, but the way I showed up as a husband and father. I let myself believe that things might actually change. Turns out, talking to her dad did not mean setting boundaries. It meant relaying every word I had said to her, including the part about leaving. That night, Randall called me, and his voice came through the phone dripping with smug authority. He told me that I could threaten ultimatums all I wanted, but I was not going to scare him. He said that staying out of my marriage was not something he intended to do, because in his mind he had every right to involve himself, since he was not going to stand by and watch his daughter suffer under a man who could not manage his own life. Hearing him twist the situation into some narrative where he was the noble protector and I was the incompetent villain made something inside my chest go cold. I hung up on him without responding. I walked straight to Emily, holding my phone in my hand like it was still burning. I asked her why she told him everything, why she thought it was acceptable for him to have a front row seat to our private arguments. She looked genuinely confused, as if she could not comprehend why I was upset. She said she needed support, and her dad always supported her. That was the moment it hit me like a punch to the ribs. I was not just fighting Randall, I was fighting the part of Emily he had raised, The part that believed his involvement was normal, helpful, even necessary. The part that had been trained to trust him more than anyone else, even her own husband. And then something I never expected happened. My mom came to visit a few days later. She is 62, works part-time at a clinic. Soft-spoken, but the kind of soft that hides steel underneath. I had not planned on telling her everything, but the second she asked how I was doing, the whole story came pouring out. I told her about Randall's binder, his lectures, his interference, and Emily's loyalty to her father over me. I expected comfort or sympathy, but my mom does not do empty reassurance. She listened, her face calm but tight around the eyes, and then she said that if I let someone make me small, I would stay small. She said I had spent my whole life being the dependable one, the helper, the steady presence. She said that being steady did not mean letting people walk all over me. She told me I needed to set a boundary and stick to it, even if sticking to it meant stepping away for a while. Hearing her say that shook me because walking away was the last thing I ever wanted. But for the first time, someone was telling me that protecting my dignity did not make me selfish. The next morning, after a night of staring at the ceiling with my heart hammering in my chest, I told Emily I would be staying at my brother's place for a few days. I said it calmly, but inside I felt like I was ripping up the foundation of my life with my bare hands. She froze like the words physically stunned her. She looked at me like I was abandoning her and whispered that she did not think I would actually go. I felt this heavy sadness settle into my stomach because she truly believed all my previous words were empty threats, dramatic noise she could ignore. I told her that she did not think I would actually mean what I said. 3 days into staying at my brother's place, when the initial shock had worn off but the ache of distance still clung to me like humidity, something major happened that shifted the entire balance of this situation. I was sitting in my brother's living room trying to focus on work emails while the muffled sound of my nieces played in the background when Emily called. Her voice was shaky, the kind of shaky that lets you know the ground has moved under their feet. She told me that Randall had shown up at our house unannounced. He walked in with the same confidence he treated everything with, as if every space he entered belonged to him. Emily said he barely waited a minute before launching into a monologue about how she needed to consider staying with him until I learned to control myself. According to him, I had created an unstable situation by leaving for a few days, so he had taken it upon himself to offer her refuge. He said she and Lily could move into his home and that he would provide a safe environment for them. Safe in his mind meant away from me. The guy who cooks dinner wakes up in the middle of the night when Lily is sick, works overtime so Emily can study for her certification, and has never raised his voice at either of them in anger. That was the man he portrayed as unsafe. Emily told me she had stood there frozen, listening to her own father paint me as someone she needed protection from. Hearing her repeat it to me, even indirectly, felt like being punched square in the chest. Not because I believed him, but because he believed himself so deeply that he expected her to fall in line without question. What caught me off guard was how her voice shifted as she spoke. There was confusion there, but also anger. For the first time, she said she felt torn and not in the defensive way she had before. She admitted she was starting to see the pattern, the way he undermined me piece by piece, situation by situation. She said that she had spent her whole life hearing him speak in that authoritative tone, and she never stopped to question it. She said she had not realized how much his criticisms were shaping her reactions to me. It was the closest she had come to acknowledging that his behavior was not normal. Then she apologized. A real apology, not a perfunctory one. She said she regretted telling him everything about our private arguments, and that she had not fully understood how manipulative he could be until she saw him try to pull her and Lily away from me. Hearing her say that felt surreal because for weeks I had been shouting into a void, and suddenly the void was answering back. And then she told me something that floored me completely, something that rearranged the way I looked at this whole situation. She said Randall had been planting seeds of doubt about me long before we were married, long before Lily was even a thought. She said he used to tell her that I was not long-term material, that she could do better, that I did not have the right temperament to be a strong partner. She said he doubted I would ever be a good father because guys like Mark get overwhelmed. To hear that he had been narrating my failures before I had even been given the chance to prove myself hit me harder than any insult he had thrown in recent months. It made something inside me harden. This man had never given me a fair chance. He never intended to. Emily asked if I would come home so we could talk face to face instead of through tense phone calls. Despite everything swirling around, I said I would, but I also told her that if Randall ever spoke to me with that condescending, controlling tone again, or tried to interfere in our household decisions, I would cut contact with him myself, and I would not wait for her to agree. I expected pushback, some automatic defense of her father, some instinctive loyalty to the man who raised her. But she nodded. She actually nodded. It was the first sign of real partnership I'd felt in weeks. Last weekend felt like walking into a controlled burn with no guarantee it would stay controlled. The sit-down was Emily's idea. I wanted distance, silence, anything but another confrontation. But she said she needed her father to hear everything directly from me. Not filtered through emotion, not twisted through his perspective, not softened by her lifelong habit of deferring to him. She said she wanted him to see us as a united front. I agreed because this felt like the moment everything had been building toward. We met at her parents' dining room table, the same table where Randall had spent years offering unsolicited lessons disguised as advice. The place smelled the same as always, a mix of lemon cleaner and wood polish, and the whole place felt like a museum dedicated to his authority. Randall sat in his usual spot, shoulders squared, posture straight, ready to take command. He opened his mouth immediately as if he had been rehearsing, saying that he thought I was overreacting. I felt something inside me flare hot, but I kept my voice steady. I cut him off before he could build momentum. I told him plainly that I was done being spoken to like a student. I told him I loved Emily and Lily, that I was committed to our family, but that his involvement in our money, our home, and our parenting was over. I said he would no longer be giving me binders, lessons, schedules, budgets, or training sessions like I was an employee who needed performance reviews. I told him that every time he spoke to me with that condescending tone, he damaged his daughter's marriage. I watched the words land. They hit him harder than I expected. He looked stunned, like no one had ever challenged him before, like the world had always adjusted around him instead of the other way around. There was a long second where the room held its breath. Then Randall pushed back from the table in this stiff, offended motion and told me that if I did not want his guidance, then I should never expect his help again. It was meant to be a punishment, a lever to pull, a consequence I was supposed to fear. I told him that I had never once asked for his help. His face tightened at that. It was like I had pulled away a role he relied on to define himself. He turned to Emily with this look of disappointment carved into his expression and asked if she was choosing me over her own father. It was the moment the entire situation hinged on, the pivot point everything balanced on. And Emily, in the calmest voice I had ever heard from her, said that she was choosing her husband because that was what marriage meant. Her words were steady and clear, as if she had finally stepped out of her father's shadow and realized she had a life of her own. I felt something swell in my chest that I had not felt for weeks. Relief, gratitude, and a strange heaviness that felt like grief for all the years she had spent trying to make loyalty to her father and loyalty to me coexist when they were never meant to. I could have cried right there, and I do not think I would have been embarrassed about it. It was that powerful. Randall stared at her as if she had spoken in another language. He opened his mouth twice, but nothing came out. Then he walked out of the house and slammed the front door so hard a picture frame on the hallway wall fell and shattered. Emily flinched but did not move. The silence that followed was heavy but not suffocating. It felt like space had finally opened up for us to breathe. It has now been 2 full weeks without a word from him. No surprise visits, no unsolicited advice, no guilt trips, no dramatic declarations about family duty. Just silence. The kind of silence that lets old wounds air out long enough to begin healing. Emily and I are not perfect, but something fundamental has shifted. She does not run to him after arguments anymore. She does not treat him like the final authority on everything. She no longer defends his behavior out of habit or fear of disappointing him. She started sitting with her own discomfort instead of using him as a buffer. We started couples therapy because we both realized that the communication between us had been filtered for too long through a third party. The therapist helped us dig out patterns we did not see before, patterns shaped by Randall's influence and Emily's childhood dynamic with him. The tension in the house has eased in ways I did not expect. Lily is sleeping better, laughing more, and clinging less. Kids feel everything, even when they cannot put words to it. And without the constant edge in the air, she seems lighter. The final twist came yesterday when Emily got a text from her mom. Her parents divorced years ago, and her mom rarely comments on anything involving Randall. But she wrote that she was proud of Emily and that Randall had always needed to be in control. She said that facing consequences for his behavior might be the only thing that ever forces him to reflect. I do not know if he ever will. I do not know if he will call someday and acknowledge anything. I do not know what the future holds for that relationship. But what I do know is that for the first time in years, I feel like a husband instead of a project.